you have to be willing to live in the space and adapt to it and for it to evolve. And I think that's what makes interiors special as well, is that they will evolve over time. Welcome back to Artfully Crafted. My name is Alienor, and each week I take you to a craft person's studio, interview them and show you their work. Except this week. A few weeks ago I showed you around my living room, dining area and kitchen. And this week we're going to carry on with the house tour. I'm going to show you my home office and our bedroom. So please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and let's get into it. Here we are in my study. You may actually recognize this space because a lot of the time I'm filming a lot of my TikTok and Instagram like at this desk or in this room. So this is why you may recognize that sort of green backdrop. But this study is probably, well, it's the only room in the house where I haven't really gotten Max involved in the design, because all of the other spaces are spaces that we share. And so, I've asked for his input throughout to make sure that he, was on board with my ideas, whereas this is the space where I've sort of most lent into, just my own aesthetic and gone to town with it. So hence, the green and the purple, and then the touches of blue and red. To be honest, it's a lot of the same colours that you see elsewhere in the flat. But again, I sort of switch around which colour is the main colour each time. As you may have seen in my living room and kitchen tour, something that I kept going back to was this idea of having a coherent colour scheme, so that as you're moving through the space, you're not sort of shocked by a brand new colour that has never been introduced. But again, it's that idea of changing the focus. So in here, green is the main colour and the other colours are accents. Whereas in the living room or the kitchen, the green was, more of a minor colour compared to, say, the yellow or the peach or the blue. Talking about, again, the design element, I always like to start with one piece as my sort of guiding principle for an entire room. So for me, it was this artwork. And again, talking about collecting, so this is not the original painting. I couldn't afford it, although I wish I could, but it is an artist proof. And this is something that I paid over a period of 6 months, I believe. But it was so well worth the wait, and it became the starting point for this room. And so that then allowed me a lot of possibilities for this room. And so whenever I add something to this room, it's very forgiving because the colours are already there, and this is the centerpiece for the room, so it really works quite well. In terms of DIY, this is another cute sort of DIY for the cornice. In the living room we had done a sort of pinned fabric cornice. In here we've actually done a stencil and painted the cornice on. So this is a very sort of traditional Gothic motif that you see with a lot of plaster cornices, and so I kind of took the same profile and then wanted it painted on as a sort of very sort of budget-friendly DIY option. And I think it frames the room beautifully, and this painting has this sort of Tudor-inspired or maybe Elizabethan kind of inspired clothing. And I don't know, I think the Gothic kind of works really well with it. So everything else has kind of sprung from that. I've got an aesthetic movement table that I found online. And then I've got my Gothic Revival bureau, which I found at auction. It's Actually, there's some real deals. If you want a beautiful piece, but you don't want to spend a lot of money on it, there are various little knobs missing on the drawers and things that were sort of broken. And so this piece was never going to fetch a lot at auction, because if you are, purist, a real collector, you want something that's in pristine condition, that's not been messed with or anything like that. And this is not the case with this piece. So I actually didn't pay very much for it. So yeah, if you're a bargain hunter, auction houses are definitely a great place to go to. I think this one was from Roseberry's, who actually, I love Roseberry's, and I've partnered with them on, promoting some of their auctions in the past. So they always have a really great selection. You can see here I DIY'd this fabric picture board. I actually use a discontinued I think it's Titley and Marr fabric called Victorian Ribbons. It actually, I guess the motif is kind of hidden, but you can see it has this sort of floral motif with, again, all of the same colours that I've been using throughout. So we've got the green, we've got some of the red, pink, the yellow, the blue. So all of that, none of that is a surprise. And again, then the ribbon, I sort of try to pick out, I didn't want a green because I already have a lot of green here. I didn't want to pick out the purple because I've got my purple cornice. So it was either going to be the blue or the yellow. I felt that the yellow was maybe going to get lost, hence I went for a blue ribbon. So these are all kind of deliberate decisions in terms of layering. And even in the way that I've picked out the artwork, it's green on green, but with a different tone of green. And here it's got the blue, it's got the purple, it's got the red. So it's just, again, that coherence, that reiteration, that consistency. And here we've got a beautiful painted shade by Malcolm Schooler. He does amazing faux painted effects. And so, yeah, that's a great one. I'd been wanting one of his creations for a long time, and I really love it. The fireplace was actually boarded up in here, and all of it was painted white. And so what I've done is I actually stripped the paint back on the actual cast iron part of the fireplace. And then all of these elements are actually just paper tape that I have cut and painted. And then when we move out, I can literally just rip it off, and the white gloss paint is still there underneath. So that, I feel like, has added a lot of personality to the room. Yeah, if you look up close, again, it's a little bit like in the previous episode where I was talking about my kitchen cabinets. The visual effect is there, and it's, when you walk into the room, it sort of creates that moment. But if you look up close, it's not perfect. That's fine. I think it's a bit more forgiving. I wouldn't do this for clients, but I think for my own space, or if you're trying to sort of DIY your own space, it's, it's fun to have those touches that are fun of personality. And, when you're in a rental, I think, you don't look too close to the edges, and that's fine. Over here, this is another piece that I inherited from my mum. Again, couldn't really part with it, so it had to come here. What I really love is that with my Gothic Revival bureau, although they're different aesthetics, this is, again, very much Gothic Revival, whereas this is introducing more of a Napoleon III kind of style. Actually, because they're both ebonized, I feel that they do work together. So it's kind of, it's quite an eclectic feel to the room. I'm not being, super faithful to one historical style. These chairs are Dutch. They actually come from my husband's side of the family. We have 4 of them. We had them re-rushed, and they're, I think they work really well in the space. I picked out the cushions, again, to be a different sort of shade of green. I think I picked out the cushion before they came into this room. If I were to pick a shade now, I would probably go for like a teal kind of color, like a blue, probably a darker kind of blue, I think would actually go really well in this space. But you know, it's fine, the cushions are in great shape, so I'm gonna use them as they are. This piece is one I found on, I think it's on sellingantiques.co.uk, or maybe eBay or Facebook Marketplace. Anyway, it's one of the three. That's always like the main sources for me, sourcing antiques. When I found it, it wasn't painted. It was just this very dark piece. And the reason why I picked it out is because this pattern, the glass cabinet that's in the living room that belonged to my grandmother, has a similar pattern. I think it's quite a recurring sort of typical pattern that you find in a lot of sort of traditional furniture like this. And I liked the idea that because it had that sort of theme sort of tied in, it would be quite versatile and be able to go in lots of different rooms. I later painted it. I feel like I could move this into the living room, you know, and it would work just as well. So in terms of future-proofing the furniture that we have, you know, I feel like this could easily move from room to room if we, you know, had to move in the future and have a different space. And then this, I think that's the extension of my ceramic collection. We saw some of them in the living room in the last episode, and here we have a few more examples. And I think that's where you really start to see as well, you know, people that I've interviewed in the past on this channel. You know, this is by Lily Permain and this is by Chris Keenan. So these are, yeah, little pieces that I'm really glad to have by them. Oh, and actually, this is a little tassel that you will have seen in Elizabeth Ashdown's video as well. She made it and then gave it to me at the end of the interview, which was really sweet. For the interviews, I'm reaching out to a lot of people that I have a sort of existing admiration for, and so either it's the case that I already followed them and already had my eye on their work, or maybe had already bought a piece. And so it's quite hard to then be there in person visiting them and not purchase something when I'm there. So yeah, I try not to, because otherwise, can you imagine, I'd be purchasing something every week, which is insane. Last but not least, here is our bedroom. And yes, this is definitely the tidiest this will ever be, trust me. So going back to the idea of having a starting point, this fabric was the starting point for this room. So again, you can see every time that I've done a scheme, we've used really what's ended up being the centerpiece as the starting point. So this is very much the main feature behind our bed. I was actually pleasantly surprised because I gave this fabric to Max and said, you pick the color that you want on the wall. And I really thought that he was going to go for the sort of like dark blue that you see, or that he was going to go with the yellow again. He pointed to the lilac and said, that's what I really want on the walls. So yeah, wasn't expecting that. Absolutely love it. I think the lilac really works in, you know, if you had a lilac in a living room, I think it would be quite a sleepy kind of space. But obviously the bedroom, that is exactly where you want to feel sleepy and sort of all nesty and cocooned. So it really works really well in making the room super cozy. And you can see the coral we've then reused for the picture rail, and then for this lovely, again, it's another Gothic stenciled decoration at the top of the wall. But this pattern I spotted in a room in a museum in Sweden. It's a museum that specializes in historic houses, and it's kind of like, gathered lots of houses and interiors from across time and across Sweden. And I think this might have been one of the like 18th century rooms that they had. I think it might have even been a bedroom. It had very different colors, of course, in the original. I think it was more like kind of stone and beige kind of colors, but I loved the pattern, so I took a photo of it, and then we sort of changed the scale, etc., slightly, and picked on color scheme for it. But yeah, so this is kind of the main DIY for this room. The fabric is just hung, basically, because we had a picture rail. We thought, let's make the most of that, and so we've got hooks, and then we've put a curtain pole, and the only thing that we've done with this fabric is basically drape it over the picture rail. And I think this one it's quite long, so we've actually draped it fully. Whereas we've got another bit of fabric across the room where we actually, because the fabric was, I think it ends sort of that level on the other side, we basically just pinned it into place, so you can adapt to how much fabric you have. I'm in a rental. I'm not going to invest in wallpaper because when we move out I wouldn't be able to take it with me. We at least have a little bit of pattern on the wall, and it's all very easily taken down when we move out. I've picked bedding that has a pattern with sort of similar colours. So we've got the yellows. Again, it took me a while to find this, actually. It's quite a recent purchase, but it has some of the coral, it has the lilac, it has the yellow, so it's picking up on all those colours again. My other sets of bedding, I think, are some of the sort of darker blue with some kind of like dusky kind of pink. So again, they work quite well in terms of bouncing off the fabric as the starting point. This is a beautiful hand-painted lampshade, which repeats all the same colours. Again, the art's very intentional. I've got the lilac mounts, I've got the red frame, the yellow frame. Again, it's all reiterating everything. So you can see you can be quite loose and playful with it. And yes, it's a lot of colour. It's definitely a maximalist atmosphere in here, but I think it all works. And, I didn't want it to be too matchy-matchy. I think it works really well to have something perfectly framed, perfectly symmetrical, and completely well balanced when it's a room that has a really regular shape. But if your room is a weird shape, then don't try to make a really sort of static kind of layout, and just, be quite playful with how you lay things out and layer things. So this is the other fabric that I was talking about. I think, it's actually just pinned there because we don't have the full sort of fabric on the other side. But again, it's the reverse, so we've got the pink background, we've got some of a red outline, and then we've got like blues and greens. I mean, again, just reiteration. I, once again, sound like a broken record, but it's really that easy. Another thing I really think is quite an important feature in this room is the rug. Now, rugs are very tricky. I would actually say that if you want to start with the rug, because to find a rug that is the right size, the right colors, the right scale of pattern is incredibly difficult, especially if you're on a budget. If you're on a budget, you're going to be very limited with the options that you find. It might take you a while to find the right rug, or it might be that you don't have the exact right size. In this instance, what I've compromised on is the size. So I've actually got a little bit of my rug sort of rolled up at the edge there. This is a very sort of budget-friendly way of doing it. This was quite a find, and I knew I had to have it because the pattern just works in here. It's the right scale, and it's sort of almost hints at like a Greek key, or like almost like a Chinese kind of pattern. But because we have so many different influences of style here, it really feeds into that eclectic aesthetic. And there's a little bit of purple that we have in the curtains. Again, the curtains aren't ours because we're renting. So it's like all of these things, it's compromising with the space, with what you have. I did want to mention this. So this was my mum's mirror, and I've chipped a little bit of the paint away to reveal the gilding behind. I just wanted to basically have this in as a little note that rooms are never finished. My aim for this mirror one day is to have the paint stripped away, and there's no way of knowing whether the gilding will need to be fully redone or just touched up. So we'll need to see, but that will be kind of a big project. I'll need to have a gilding specialist involved, so that will probably be quite a lot of money. Not something I'll be able to do right away. But this is something that my mum painted white in the 90s, because that's what people did in the 90s. And yeah, my mum loved a fully white living room. You might wonder why I'm such a maximalist when it comes to colour. But yeah, so I love this mirror, I love the shape of it. And, you know, in my mind, this room is a little bit of a work in progress because of the fact that this isn't fully in the state that I want it to be in, but you know, that's okay. What I find often is that as soon as I finish something breaks and then you have to replace it, and then so you're never quite done. Or, you know, you finish painting your room and then you scuff it and then you have to touch it up again. You know, you have to be willing to live in the space and adapt to it and for it to evolve. And I think that's what makes interiors special as well, is that they will evolve over time. And so I'm always kind of rearranging things and around the house. And I think if you saw how this space was, you know, 2 years ago, for example, World of Interiors did a feature about this space a couple of years ago. And so if you compare the photos of now to that article, you know, the space has changed quite a lot, and I think that's a reflection of how we've evolved as well. So yeah, that's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this little peek behind the scenes at, you know, how I've decorated my home, and probably gives you a little bit of insight into who I am and what drives me in terms of design. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and as always, please engage with this video, like, share and subscribe. See you next week. Moment. I'm using such like awful words, like this moment. It's like, shut up. I know, it's awful.